Jack Reynolds knew it was going to be one of those days when he realized his ceremonial pocket square was actually a dryer sheet. 2 months as Earth's diplomatic representative to the Galactic Council, and he still couldn't get his shit together. He plucked the offending fabric from his suit pocket and tossed it into a waste receptacle that hummed appreciatively. Nutritional input detected. Processing, chirped the bin. It's not food, Jack sighed. It's a dryer sheet. Processing. Delicious Earth cuisine accepted. 5 nutrient points awarded to human Jack. Jack shook his head. Even the garbage cans in the Proxima Centauri diplomatic complex were patronizing. He straightened his actual pocket square and checked his reflection in the polished surface of the nearest wall. At 35 he looked exactly like what he was, a mid-level diplomat who'd drawn the short straw when Earth needed someone to send to the Galactic Council after first contact. His comm unit buzzed. Human diplomat Reynolds, your presence is requested in Council Chamber Alpha 9 in 15 standard minutes. The artificial voice paused. A reminder that, as per Council Statute 7329b, all human representatives must submit to weapons screening and attend chambers unarmed. Yeah, Jack muttered. Same as every day. That was the weird thing. Every other species got to bring their ceremonial weapons into the chamber. It was considered a grave insult to ask a Vraxian to remove their poison-tipped honor blades, or to request that a Morgathan ambassador leave behind their sonic disruptor gauntlets. The Jixel delegation couldn't physically separate from their bioengineered defense parasites without dying, and nobody even asked the pucks to explain what those glowing orbs were. But humans had to go through a 17-point weapons screening that included a DNA scan, a psychological evaluation, and a weirdly specific questionnaire about whether you'd ever used a spoon in anger. Jack had asked about it during orientation. His guide, a 6-limbed protocol officer named Trex with pearlescent scales and a penchant for dramatic size, had merely fluttered all 3 of his eye membranes. It is for the safety of all human Reynolds. The statutes were written after the incident of Diplomatic Corridor 7. What incident? I've never heard of any incident. That is because all records were classified under Galactic Security Code Omega. Let us just say that we do not speak of it, and humans attend Council unarmed. Jack had tried to press for more details, but Trex had suddenly remembered an urgent appointment involving ceremonial gill polishing. Every other official Jack approached either changed the subject or mysteriously developed selective translator malfunctions. Now, as he made his way to the weapons screening station, Jack nodded to Grip, the 4-armed security officer whose species name contained so many consonants that human vocal cords physically couldn't pronounce it. Morning, Grip. Ready to ensure I'm not smuggling in any deadly ballpoint pens today. Grip's face tentacles twitched in what might have been amusement. Protocol is protocol, human Jack. Please step into the scanner. Jack spread his arms as the security arch hummed around him. You know, I'm starting to think this whole humans must be unarmed thing is just species discrimination. What's the worst we could do? We don't have natural weapons like half the council members. Grip's 8 eyes blinked in unison. That is precisely the concern, human Jack. Wait, what? That doesn't make any sense. Scan complete. Human Jack Reynolds is unarmed and cleared for council attendance, announced the system, cutting off any further conversation. Jack frowned as he collected his identification badge. What did Grip mean? The whole thing made no sense. Humans were practically defenseless compared to most species in the council. The Drex had retractable bone blades. The Vorba could spit acid up to 20 feet. Even the peaceful Lumi could generate electrical discharges powerful enough to stun a creature 3 times their size. Humans had fingernails, and those dull, pathetic teeth that couldn't even pierce most alien hides. As he approached the massive doors to Council Chamber Alpha 9, Jack noticed Ambassador Keswick Tix of the Mantodian Hive sharpening his forearm scythes against a ceremonial whetstone. The insectoid diplomat nodded cordially. Human Reynolds, prepared for today's trade resolution debate. I hear the Jolnar Consortium is bringing their ceremonial plasma lances. Keswick Tix clicked his mandibles cheerfully. Should be quite the show of force. Great, Jack muttered. I'll be sure to wave my ceremonial handkerchief with extra vigor. The massive doors swung open, revealing the amphitheater-style chamber beyond. 217 species represented, most armed to the teeth, literally in many cases. And then there was Earth, represented by one confused human with nothing but a datapad and growing suspicion that he was missing something very, very important about intergalactic politics. The Council Arbiter, a floating gelatinous cube that somehow managed to look both dignified and slightly nauseous, pulsed with formal light patterns. The Galactic Council recognizes human Jack Reynolds of Earth. You may approach and be seated. We note with approval your compliance with Statute 7329B regarding human weaponry restrictions. Jack took his seat at the Earth delegation desk, acutely aware of the ceremonial weapons displayed prominently by every other representative. Whatever this mysterious incident of Diplomatic Corridor 7 was, it must have been one hell of a misunderstanding. As the council session prepared to begin, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that today was going to answer some questions whether he wanted those answers or not. The council chamber was a marvel of xeno-architecture, designed to accommodate beings that breathed everything from oxygen to methane, to radioactive noble gases. Jack's section was mercifully set for Earth standard atmosphere, though he could see the Hydraxian representative happily bobbing in what appeared to be a giant fishbowl 3 platforms away. Order, we shall have order. The council arbiter's translation matrix boomed across the chamber. The gelatinous cube pulsed urgent shades of mauve. The 4927th session of the Galactic Council is now in session. First item: trade route, disputes in the Cygnus arm. Jack settled in, datapad ready. This was why he was here, to ensure Earth's shipping lanes remained protected as they expanded their first interstellar trade networks. Boring but essential diplomatic work. That's when the doors burst open, and the Krelvac delegation made their traditional entrance. 6 9-foot-tall reptilians stomped in, each wearing ceremonial battle armor that appeared to be made from the bones of their enemies. Their leader, Ambassador Graz, carried a vibro halberd that hummed with barely contained energy. The weapon was taller than Jack. The Krelvac Imperium honors this council with its presence. Graz bellowed, slamming the halberd against the floor. Sparks shot across the marble-like surface. The council arbiter's color shifted to a patient yellow. Yes, Ambassador Graz, you are as always recognized. Please take your seats with less structural damage than last session. Jack leaned toward Nix Vala, the Indarian representative to his right. Nix Vala resembled nothing so much as a blue-furred sloth with compound eyes. Is that halberd actually functional? Jack whispered. Nix Vala's fur rippled with amusement. Of course not, human Jack. It is ceremonial. The power core is limited to 1/10 capability, just enough for impressive displays without actual disembowelment capability. She patted the ornate dagger strapped to her own forearm. Much like my ceremonial toxin blade. The poison reservoir is sealed with 17 security measures. That's reassuring. Indeed, we are civilized beings. The weapons are symbolic of our heritage, not meant for actual conflict resolution. Nix Vala's compound eyes glittered. Though I have always wondered why humans alone must attend completely unarmed. Most curious. Jack was about to press for more information when another dramatic entrance cut him off. The Qualaxian delegation floated in, literally floated, suspended in personal anti-gravity fields. Their bodies resembled luminescent jellyfish, with hundreds of tentacles that rippled hypnotically. Each tentacle ended in what appeared to be a miniature glowing star. The Qualaxian harmony greets the assembled worthies, their leader announced melodiously. We bring light to darkness. As if on cue, all their tentacle stars brightened, casting the chamber in a kaleidoscope of colors. Ambassador Zephyr Song acknowledged the arbiter. Your ceremonial light weapons are as always appreciated, but please dim to regulation levels. The lights dimmed slightly. Jack blinked away the spots in his vision. Light weapons, he muttered. Nix Vala nodded. Concentrated photon emission devices. Ceremonial, of course. At full power, they could vaporize this section of the complex, but they are limited to decorative brightness only. Of course they are, Jack said weakly. The parade of species continued. The Murgadi warriors entered wearing exoskeletons that increased their strength tenfold, purely traditional. The Zith delegation brought their sonic resonance crystals, harmless at current frequencies. The Voltrox combined representatives arrived with their neural disruptor crowns, completely dampened, I assure you. With each new arrival, and each increasingly apocalyptic ceremonial weapon, Jack felt increasingly naked. The only other species without visible weapons were the Paulians, who resembled oversized hamsters, though Jack had heard rumors their cheek pouches contained paralytic spores. Doesn't anyone find it odd that every species gets to bring doomsday devices as fashion accessories, while I had to surrender a nail clipper at security? Jack whispered to Nixvala. She blinked all 5 eyes in sequence. The incident, yes, the mysterious incident of Diplomatic Corridor 7, that nobody will explain. It is not spoken of, she said suddenly formal. There are reasons, human Jack. Good reasons. Before Jack could respond, a commotion erupted across the chamber. The Krelvac ambassador had risen to his full height, vibro halberd quivering with barely contained energy. The Cygnus arm, trade routes belong to the Krelvac by right of historical precedent. Graz thundered. The Jolner merchants are encroaching. The Jolner representative, a being composed of what appeared to be interlocking geometric crystals, rose in response. Ambassador Facet's voice rang with harmonic overtones. The Krelvac claim is based on conquest during the pre-council era, which this body has repeatedly ruled invalid. The roots belong to all spacefaring species. Graz slammed his halberd down again. More sparks flew. The Krelvac do not recognize such rulings when they contradict Krelvac glory. Jack glanced at the Arbiter, expecting intervention, but the gelatinous cube merely pulsed in what appeared to be resignation. Around the chamber, other representatives were rising. The Qualaxians' light weapons brightened. The Mergati exoskeletons whirred as hydraulics engaged. The Zith crystals began emitting a faint hum that made Jack's teeth ache. Is this normal? Jack asked, gripping his pathetic datapad. Nix Vela's fur was standing on end. Tensions have been high lately. But don't worry, human Jack. The ceremonial weapons cannot cause actual harm. The safety protocols. She was interrupted by a deafening roar as Gross raised his halberd higher. The Krelvac demand satisfaction. Prepare for demonstration of Krelvac might. The halberd's energy field expanded, crackling dangerously. Several delegates gasped. Ambassador Gross, the Arbiter's voice boomed. Your weapons limiter appears to be malfunctioning. Security protocols require Krelvac recognize no limiters. Gross bellowed, as the halberd's energy field grew brighter. Ambassador Facet of the Jolnar rose higher, crystal body refracting light in increasingly rapid patterns. If the Krelvac insist on intimidation tactics, the Jolnar consortium will respond appropriately. The crystalline ambassador's body began to glow from within, geometric patterns shifting to what Jack somehow instinctively recognized as an attack configuration. All around the chamber, other representatives were standing, ceremonial weapons humming, glowing, or otherwise activating in response to the escalating situation. The Arbiter pulsed frantically. This council will have order. Security protocols are in effect. All ceremonial weapons must stand down immediately. But the situation was spiraling. Jack watched in horrified fascination as 200 species simultaneously prepared for what appeared to be imminent diplomatic disaster, each with weapons that, safety limiters or not, could probably level the complex. And there sat Jack Reynolds, Earth's representative, completely unarmed apart from his datapad and the now rumpled pocket square. This isn't good, he muttered, as Gross's halberd swung dangerously close to Ambassador Facet's crystalline form. Around him, the chamber erupted into chaos. Diplomatic hell broke loose faster than Jack could process. Gross's halberd scythed through the air with a crackling whine, missing Ambassador Facet by centimeters as the crystalline being shifted shape to avoid the blow. The weapon slammed into the Jolnar delegation podium instead, sending fractures through the ancient stone. Krelvac's superiority will be acknowledged. Gross bellowed. The Qualaxian representative's tentacle stars flared blindingly in response, forcing Jack to shield his eyes. When he could see again, he spotted the Mergati delegation advancing in their exoskeletons, the metal joints whirring ominously. The Mergati clutch will not permit violence in sacred chambers, their leader announced, the exoskeleton's arms extending to twice their normal length. The Council Arbiter's gelatinous form was now pulsing rapid-fire patterns of red and orange. This council is in violation of Protocol 87 Delta. All ceremonial weapons must power down immediately. Security systems activating. From the ceiling, crystalline emitters emerged and began bathing the chamber in a shimmering field. Jack felt a slight tingling across his skin, but otherwise nothing happened. Nothing happened to him, at least. Around the chamber, however, the effect was immediate and bizarre. The energy field of Gross's halberd flickered and died. The Qualaxians' light weapons dimmed to mere firefly glows. The Mergati exoskeletons froze mid-stride, their pilots suddenly trapped in mechanized cocoons. Dampening field engaged, announced the chamber's security system. All ceremonial weapons have been neutralized for the safety of the Council. Jack blinked in surprise. Every single intimidating weapon in the room had been rendered harmless in seconds. Ambassador Gross was now holding what amounted to a decorative stick. The fearsome Zith crystals were just pretty paperweights. That's when things got weird. Ambassador Facet, apparently still enraged, launched himself bodily at Gross, despite his weapons being neutralized. The crystalline being collided with the reptilian with a sound like wind chimes hitting a gong. The Julnar will not be threatened, Facet chimed, his crystalline limbs somehow managing to grab Gross's ceremonial armor. Gross hissed in response, his jaw unhinging to reveal rows of teeth. Despite the dampening field, those were still very much functional. Krelvac bite brings death. Other delegates were joining the fray now. Their ceremonial weapons useless but their natural biological capabilities intact. The chamber descended into what Jack could only describe as the galaxy's most dignified bar fight. The Paulians were indeed disgorging paralytic spores from their cheek pouches. The Hydraxian had somehow breached his atmosphere containment, and was spraying pressurized liquid at nearby combatants. 2 Vorba were attempting to spit acid, though the dampening field seemed to be reducing it to mild irritant levels. "This is ridiculous," Jack muttered, ducking as a glob of Vorba spit sailed over his head. He glanced at Nix Vela, who had taken shelter under their shared delegation table. "Is this what passes for diplomacy in the Galactic Council?" Nix Vela's fur was standing straight up in alarm. "This has not happened since the incident. The famous incident of Diplomatic Corridor 7 that nobody will explain," Jack asked, rolling his eyes. A crash nearby drew his attention. Ambassador Gross and Ambassador Facet were grappling dangerously close to his position, with neither gaining the upper hand. Gross's teeth couldn't penetrate Facet's crystalline form, while Facet's hardened edges couldn't seem to damage Gross's scales. "Submit, crystal creature," Gross roared. "The Julnar submit to no one." Facet chimed back. They crashed into the Earth delegation table, sending Jack's datapad flying. Jack scrambled to his feet, momentarily forgetting the danger as annoyance flared. "Hey, I spent hours preparing those trade route proposals." Neither diplomat paid him any attention, continuing their ineffectual battle. All around the chamber, similar scenes were playing out, species with their ceremonial weapons neutralized, falling back on natural abilities that seemed equally useless against their opponents. The Council Arbiter was pulsing frantically now. "Security personnel have been dispatched. All delegates cease hostilities immediately." Jack watched as the gelatinous cube extended tendrils toward the nearest combatants, attempting to separate them. The tendrils simply slipped off the combatants' forms without effect. That's when Jack realized something odd. Despite the chamber erupting into what should have been a diplomatic catastrophe, with representatives of over 200 species attempting to assault each other, no one was actually getting hurt. The Krelvac's teeth couldn't penetrate the Julnar's crystal body. The Mergati exoskeletons were frozen in place. The Qualaxians' light weapons were decorative at best. The Vorba's acid was reduced to slightly acidic saliva. The Zith crystal's sonic properties were dampened to harmless vibrations. Every species was essentially rendered harmless by some combination of the dampening field and the natural incompatibilities between alien physiologies. It was as if the universe had designed the perfect stalemate. And then Ambassador Gross's thrashing tail whipped around and caught Jack square in the chest. The impact sent him sprawling backward, knocking the wind from his lungs. Pain flared across his sternum. For a moment, he just lay there, gasping. Then something shifted in Jack's brain. A cocktail of adrenaline, indignation, and 2 months of diplomatic frustration erupted. He climbed to his feet, eyes locked on the oblivious Gross, who was still attempting to bite Facet's unbiteable form. Without thinking, because thinking would have reminded him that Gross was 9 feet tall, reptilian, and possessed teeth the size of steak knives. Jack Reynolds, official representative of Earth, balled up his fist and did what humans had been doing to solve problems since the dawn of their species. He punched Ambassador Gross of the Krelvac Imperium square in the back of the head. The impact sent pain shooting through Jack's knuckles, but more surprising was Gross's reaction. The massive reptilian diplomat froze, then slowly toppled sideways like a felled tree, crashing to the chamber floor with a thunderous impact that shook the entire podium. Ambassador Gross, the fearsome representative of the Krelvac Imperium, was unconscious. The chamber fell silent. Every alien eye, optical sensor, and sensory apparatus turned toward Jack. He stood there, shaking his throbbing hand, equally shocked by what he'd just done. He was damaging Earth's trade proposals. Jack offered weakly. The silence stretched for 5 more seconds. Then the Council Arbiter pulsed a deep somber purple. Containment breach, the Arbiter announced gravely. Human weaponry detected. Chamber lockdown initiated. Metal shutters slammed down over every exit. Warning lights flashed, and Jack Reynolds suddenly understood exactly why humans were the only species required to attend the Galactic Council unarmed. Steel shutters clanged into place over every exit. Alarm klaxons wailed. Emergency lighting bathed the chamber in an ominous red glow. Human weaponry containment protocol activated, announced the chamber's security system. All delegates please remain calm and follow evacuation procedures. Jack stood frozen, staring at his fist in disbelief. Around him, the alien diplomats were scrambling away, creating a rapidly expanding circle of space between themselves and the apparently dangerous human. "I don't understand," Jack said to no one in particular. "I just punched him." The Council Arbiter's gelatinous form pulsed with what appeared to be a mixture of alarm and resignation. Tendrils extended from the cube to gesture at Jack's hands. "Security, please escort the human representative to Containment Chamber Delta and initiate standard human pacification protocols." 4 security drones descended from ceiling panels, surrounding Jack with humming energy fields. "Wait," Jack protested, as the drones began herding him toward a newly opened panel in the wall. "This is ridiculous. I just threw a punch. He's not even badly hurt." As if to underline his point, Ambassador Gross groaned from his position on the floor, massive reptilian body beginning to stir. "The human's assessment is accurate," came the crystalline voice of Ambassador Facet. The Gelnar representative had reformed into a taller configuration, light refracting through his geometric body in what Jack somehow recognized as a thoughtful pattern. The force applied was minimal by Krelvac physiological standards. Ambassador Gross should not have been incapacitated. The Arbiter pulsed hesitantly. "Nevertheless, protocol demands, if I may, Arbiter," interrupted another voice. Jack turned to see Nyx Vela stepping forward, her blue fur still standing on end but her compound eyes fixed firmly on the gelatinous cube. "As witness to the incident, I believe review of security footage is warranted before containment protocols are fully implemented." A murmur ran through the assembled diplomats. The Arbiter's pulsing slowed, colors shifting through various spectrums before settling on a reluctant blue. "Your request is procedurally valid, Representative Nyx Vela. Security, display chamber footage. Timestamp reference 42.87.16. The center of the chamber shimmered as a holographic display materialized. Jack watched with a surreal sense of detachment as his own image appeared in perfect 3-dimensional detail, showing him rising from the floor, face contorted in what he had to admit was a rather impressive display of human rage, before delivering that fateful punch to the back of Gross's head. The footage played in slow motion. Jack's fist connected with Gross's scaled skull. A ripple visibly spread through the reptilian's body. Then, like a puppet with cut strings, Gross collapsed. "Enhance biometric data," ordered the Arbiter. The hologram zoomed in, showing Jack's fist at the moment of impact. Multicolored overlays appeared, displaying various measurements and readings that Jack couldn't begin to interpret. "Impact force 227.8 galactic standard units," announced the system. "Below lethal threshold for Krelvac physiology by factor of 12.4. "Then why did Ambassador Gross lose consciousness?" demanded a delegate Jack couldn't identify from his position. The Arbiter pulsed thoughtfully. "Display neural response pattern." The hologram shifted again, this time showing a strange web-like overlay across Gross's skull. As Jack's holographic fist made contact, the web flared with electrical patterns that raced along specific pathways before concentrating at a particular junction. The junction point overloaded with energy, triggering a cascade effect throughout the neural web. "What are we seeing?" Jack asked, genuinely confused. A new voice answered, the gravelly tones of Dr. Velk, the Council's xenobiology specialist. The spindly multi-limbed figure stepped forward, adjusting various sensory apparatus extending from what Jack assumed was his head. What we are witnessing, Human Reynolds, is precisely why your species attends Council unarmed, Dr. Velk said. The hologram displays the effect of kinetic impact on Ambassador Gross's galvanic neural cluster, what humans might call a pressure point. Understanding began to dawn on Jack. Wait, you mean I accidentally hit some kind of reptilian knockout button? Dr. Velk's sensory stalks waved in affirmation. Precisely, though accident is a generous interpretation. Human Reynolds, are you trained in combat techniques? What? No. I mean, I took a self-defense class in college, but that was years ago. The xenobiologist turned to address the chamber at large, yet the human instinctively struck one of the 17 primary neural vulnerability nodes in Krelvac physiology, a node that I might add is not visually distinguishable from surrounding tissue. A murmur ran through the assembled aliens. Jack felt distinctly uncomfortable with all eyes on him. It was just luck, he protested. Bad luck, apparently. Perhaps Dr. Velk conceded. But this luck is precisely what the human weapons ban addresses. Security, display historical reference file 7329B. The hologram shifted again, this time showing what appeared to be security footage from decades earlier. The timestamp indicated it was from nearly 50 years ago, the early days of Earth's integration into the Galactic Council. The footage showed a diplomatic corridor, presumably the infamous Corridor 7, where a human woman in an outdated Earth uniform was surrounded by 3 hulking aliens of a species Jack didn't recognize. The human diplomat Maria Chen of Earth was cornered by 3 Huxley enforcers during the tariff disputes of the 197th Council session, narrated Dr. Velk. Watch carefully. Jack watched as the human diplomat, clearly alarmed but maintaining composure, attempted to back away from the advancing aliens. When they continued to crowd her, the woman suddenly moved, a blur of precise strikes with hands, elbows, and feet. In less than 5 seconds, all 3 aliens were on the ground, apparently incapacitated. Chen was a basic-level Unified Earth Defense Force trainee before entering diplomatic service, Dr. Velk continued. What you witnessed was not advanced combat training, merely standard human physical education. Jack blinked in surprise. Basic training. That looked like something from an action movie. Dr. Velk's sensory stalks quivered. To us, yes, and therein lies the issue that led to Statute 7329B. The hologram expanded to show multiple footage clips playing simultaneously, different incidents, different humans, different alien species, but all with the same outcome. Humans delivering seemingly minor physical strikes that incapacitated much larger, seemingly more dangerous aliens. Human physiology evolved on a high-gravity, high-oxygen world with exceptional environmental pressures, Dr. Velk explained. This resulted in a species with extraordinary kinesthetic intelligence, muscular coordination, and most relevantly, an instinctive ability to identify and exploit structural and neurological vulnerabilities in other organisms. The arbiter pulsed in agreement. In the early days of Earth's membership, numerous incidents occurred before we understood this capability. Council records document 73 separate occasions where unarmed humans accidentally incapacitated armed representatives of other species during diplomatic disagreements. Jack's jaw dropped. 73. But that's not possible. Humans aren't that dangerous. Most species in this room could tear us apart. In direct confrontation using raw strength perhaps, agreed Dr. Velk. But humans don't fight that way. You fight efficiently. The hologram shifted to show anatomical diagrams of various council species, each highlighted with specific points marked in red. Human Reynolds, what do you see? Asked Dr. Velk. Jack studied the diagrams. They look like weak points, vulnerable areas, indeed, and to most species these vulnerabilities are not intuitively obvious. But in our studies of human combat response, 97.8% of humans instinctively target these exact points when threatened, even without formal training. The chamber had fallen silent as the implications sank in. Jack looked at his fist again, still throbbing from the impact with Gross's skull. So you're telling me that humans are the only species required to be unarmed in council chambers because our bodies are the weapons? The arbiter's form pulsed in confirmation. Precisely, human Reynolds. Your species presents a unique security concern, not because you are more violent than others, but because you are naturally equipped to exploit vulnerabilities that other species cannot even perceive. From his position on the floor, Ambassador Gross finally regained consciousness with a rumbling groan. The massive reptilian diplomat pushed himself upright, one clawed hand rubbing the back of his head. The Krelvac demand explanation, he bellowed, though with notably less vigor than before. What weapon struck Gross? The Arbiter pulsed soothingly. Ambassador Gross, you were rendered unconscious by an unarmed human using natural human capabilities. The dampening field was functioning normally. Gross's yellow eyes widened, then narrowed as he focused on Jack. Impossible. The human is tiny and soft, and yet, interjected Ambassador Facet, crystalline form shimmering with what might have been amusement, you were unconscious while the human remained standing. Jack swallowed nervously, as Gross's reptilian gaze fixed on him with new interest. Fascinating, the ambassador declared, rising to his full height. The Krelvac respects strength. Perhaps humans deserve closer examination. Somehow, Jack didn't find that particularly reassuring. Order. The Arbiter's voice boomed across the chamber as its gelatinous form pulsed with authoritative blues and purples. Security protocols remain in effect. This council will proceed with rationality, not closer examination of any delegate. The emergency lighting faded, returning the chamber to its normal illumination. The metal shutters remained in place over the exits, but the tension in the room had noticeably decreased. Jack stood awkwardly, acutely aware that every alien representative was now regarding him, and by extension, humanity, with newfound wariness. The security drones still hovered nearby, but they had backed off to a less threatening distance. Ambassador Gross had finally regained his full faculties, and was now examining Jack with what appeared to be begrudging respect. The massive reptilian straightened his ceremonial armor with a series of sharp tugs. The Krelvac withdrew objection to human presence, Gross announced, his volume still ear-splitting but slightly less aggressive. Any species that can fell a Krelvac warrior with a single strike deserves voice in galactic matters. That's generous of you, Jack said carefully, though I want to emphasize that wasn't my intention. I just reacted. Instinctive combat prowess is most honorable, Gross bellowed approvingly. The Arbiter pulsed with what Jack interpreted as the gelatinous equivalent of a sigh. Let the record show that the diplomatic incident has been resolved without formal charges. However, human Reynolds, the Council must address your violation of Statute 7329B. I didn't bring any weapons, Jack protested. No, the Arbiter agreed, but you did employ human combat capabilities within Council chambers, which the statute specifically prohibits. Jack held up his hands in frustration. How was I supposed to know I wasn't allowed to punch someone? Nobody told me that was what the weapons prohibition actually meant. A procedurally valid point, acknowledged Nix Vela, stepping forward again. Her blue fur had finally settled back into its normal pattern. The orientation materials provided to Earth's diplomatic corps do not explicitly state the full reasoning behind Statute 7329B. The Arbiter's pulsing slowed thoughtfully. This oversight will be addressed in future diplomatic materials. However, the current situation remains. If I may interject, interrupted Ambassador Facet, crystalline form reconfiguring into what Jack had learned was their formal address configuration. The Jolnar Consortium proposes a constructive resolution. The chamber fell silent, all attention turning to the crystalline diplomat. The current trade route dispute that precipitated this incident remains unresolved. The Krelvac Imperium claims historical rights that conflict with the open access principles of the Council. Rather than continuing a debate that has already led to unfortunate physical altercations, I propose we allow human Reynolds to mediate. Murmurs swept through the chamber. The Arbiter's form rippled with surprise. You propose allowing the human who just rendered Ambassador Gross unconscious to mediate a dispute involving the Krelvac Imperium. Krelvac approve. Gross thundered unexpectedly. Human Reynolds has proven strength and honor. Jack stared at Gross in disbelief. You want me to mediate after I knocked you out? Gross's reptilian features arranged themselves into what might have been a smile, though the effect was more terrifying than reassuring. Krelvac respect those who defeat us in honorable combat. You have earned right to speak for Krelvac interests. That's not how diplomacy is supposed to work, Jack muttered, but he could see the Arbiter was already pulsing in consideration of the proposal. Ambassador Facet, your suggestion has procedural merit, but raises security concerns. Human Reynolds has demonstrated the very capability that Statute 7329B was designed to contain. A capability that appears to have diffused rather than escalated the situation. Facet pointed out, facets glinting. Had any other species attempted physical intervention, Ambassador Graz would likely have escalated to lethal force. Instead, the human's efficient incapacitation technique prevented further violence. The Arbiter pulsed in what appeared to be reluctant agreement. Your logic is sound. Human Reynolds, would you be willing to serve as mediator in this dispute, under the strict condition that no further physical negotiation techniques are employed? Jack looked around the chamber, at the 200 alien faces watching him expectantly. He had come to this session prepared to quietly advocate for Earth's minor shipping interests. Now he was being asked to mediate one of the most contentious territorial disputes in the Cygnus Arm. Because he had punched someone. Diplomacy was weird. I'd be honored to serve as mediator, Jack said finally. But I'll need full access to historical records and previous negotiation attempts. Granted, the Arbiter pulsed. Security, release chamber lockdown and escort the delegates to Mediation Suite Epsilon. The metal shutters retracted, and the security drones repositioned themselves to guide the parties toward one of the smaller chambers adjoining the main council room. As Jack gathered his datapad miraculously unbroken, Nix Vela approached him. A most fortuitous outcome, Human Jack, she said quietly, her compound eyes glittering. Though perhaps not entirely unexpected. Jack raised an eyebrow. You don't seem surprised by any of this. The Endarian archive contains extensive records of human diplomatic incidents. Your species has a curious habit of resolving conflicts through unexpected means. You mean by accidentally punching people? Not always punching. Nix Vela's fur rippled with amusement. Sometimes it's what you call tripping, or elbowing, or my personal favorite, getting your point across. Jack groaned. Please tell me Earth's diplomatic corps isn't just secretly going around assaulting other species. Not at all, she assured him. But humans do possess a certain directness that other species find simultaneously alarming and effective. As they walked toward the mediation suite, Ambassador Graz fell into step beside them, his massive form casting a shadow over Jack. The reptilian diplomat had retrieved his now depowered halberd, and was carrying it like an oversized walking stick. Human Reynolds, Graz boomed, apparently incapable of speaking at a normal volume. Krelvac tradition demands gift exchange after honorable combat. You will accept ceremonial blood dagger at conclusion of mediation. That's really not necessary. Refusal is grave insult, Graz warned, yellow eyes narrowing. Jack swallowed. Then I'd be honored to accept. Excellent. It shall be blunted and deactivated as per council regulations for human possession. Graz seemed genuinely delighted. As they entered the mediation suite, Jack found himself at the head of a table surrounded by representatives from 12 species with competing interests in the Cygnus Arm trade routes. Ambassador Facet took position to his right, while Graz dominated the left side of the table. The council recognizes Human Reynolds as mediator for this dispute, announced the Arbiter's voice through the room's communication system. Proceedings will be recorded for the archives. Jack took a deep breath and looked around the table. Every alien was watching him intently, waiting to see what the dangerous human would do next. He smiled. Before we begin formal mediation, I'd like to propose something unorthodox, Jack said calmly. Ambassador Graz, would you be willing to demonstrate the cultural significance of the Krelvac ceremonial halberd for the delegates? I believe understanding each other's heritage is the first step toward meaningful compromise. Graz's reptilian features registered surprise, then pleasure. The Krelvac would be honored to share our glorious traditions. As Graz launched into a surprisingly detailed if ear-splittingly loud explanation of Krelvac martial history, Jack caught Facet's crystalline form shifting in what he now recognized as approval. A wise approach, Human Reynolds, the Jolnar representative communicated via a private channel to Jack's datapad. Few have ever asked about Krelvac traditions without fear. I'm learning that sometimes the best diplomatic weapon is genuine curiosity, Jack replied quietly, as he made notes on his datapad and Graz continued his enthusiastic cultural lecture. For the first time since arriving at the Galactic Council, Jack felt like he might actually be good at this job, not despite being human, but because of it. 3 weeks after the infamous Reynolds incident, as it was now being called in diplomatic circles, Jack stood in the main observation lounge of the Proxima Centauri diplomatic complex, staring out at the swirling nebula visible through the massive viewports. His reflection in the transparent aluminum showed a man who'd gained a new confidence in his posture, despite the dark circles under his eyes from marathon negotiation sessions. The Cygnus Arm trade route dispute had been resolved with surprising efficiency. Jack's solution creating tiered access zones with preferential but not exclusive rights for the Krelvac, while establishing a neutral monitoring committee led by the Jolnar, had been accepted unanimously by the Council. Human Reynolds came a familiar gelatinous voice behind him. Your presence is requested in Chamber Omega. Jack turned to find the Arbiter's form hovering nearby, pulsing with formal blues and greens. Chamber Omega, I don't think I've been there before. Few have. It is reserved for Council executive matters. Jack followed the floating cube through a series of corridors he'd never seen before, eventually arriving at an unmarked door that slid open at their approach. Inside was a small circular room with 13 seats arranged around a central holographic projector. 11 of the seats were already occupied by the senior council members, the representatives of the founding species of the Galactic Council. Please be seated, Human Reynolds, instructed the Arbiter, flowing into position at what appeared to be the head of the circle. Jack took the only empty seat, feeling distinctly underdressed for what was clearly a high-level meeting. I'm honored to be invited, but I'm not sure why I'm here. Senior Counselor Zell Praxi of the Archivists leaned forward, compound eyes fixed on Jack. The ancient insectoid's chitinous exoskeleton creaked slightly with the movement. Human Reynolds, your recent diplomatic success has prompted the Executive Council to reconsider Statute 7329B, regarding human weapons restrictions. Jack sat up straighter. You're lifting the ban. Quite the opposite, replied Zell Praxi, mandibles clicking with amusement. We are expanding it. The central hologram activated, displaying the text of what appeared to be a new council statute. Jack scanned the document, his confusion growing. Statute 7329C. All human diplomatic personnel shall undergo specialized training in the proper non-utilization of innate combat capabilities. All humans in council spaces must wear monitoring bracelets that detect accelerated movement patterns consistent with human combat techniques. Jack looked up in disbelief. You're making the restrictions stricter. The Arbiter pulsed affirmatively. With certain modifications. Senior Counselor Mr. Dval of the Collective rumbled from across the circle, his massive form barely contained by the reinforced chair. The Executive Council has determined that human capabilities represent both a security concern and a valuable diplomatic resource. I don't understand, Jack admitted. The hologram shifted to display footage from the mediation sessions Jack had led over the past 3 weeks. It showed him in various diplomatic scenarios, calming an agitated Krelvac delegate with a carefully placed hand on the shoulder, standing his ground when a Zith representative invaded his personal space, deftly catching a falling ceremonial artifact before it could shatter and cause offense. These appear to be ordinary diplomatic interactions, Jack said cautiously. To human perception perhaps, said Zell Praxi. Our analysis reveals that in each instance, you positioned yourself in what our combat specialists call advantage stance. You maintained optimal striking distance, controlled the physical space, and consistently placed yourself where you could, if necessary, incapacitate the primary aggressor within 0.8 seconds. Jack stared at the footage with new eyes. I wasn't doing that consciously. Precisely our point, the Arbiter pulsed. Humans instinctively establish physical dominance in ways too subtle for most species to consciously perceive, yet on a subconscious level, the effect is quite powerful. The hologram shifted again, this time showing biometric data from the various aliens Jack had interacted with. Heart rates, hormone levels and neural patterns were displayed alongside the footage. Note the physiological responses, continued Zell Praxi. When you maintained what humans would consider respectful distance while showing interest in Krelvac traditions, Ambassador Gross's aggression hormones decreased by 74%. You weren't submissive, which would have triggered Krelvac predatory instincts, but positioned yourself in a way that registered as capable but non-threatening. I was just trying to be diplomatic, Jack protested. Indeed, rumbled Mr. Val, and therein lies the revelation that has prompted this meeting. Humans appear uniquely capable of physical communication that transcends species barriers. You instinctively adjust your positioning, gestures and micro-movements in ways that register as appropriate across wildly different cultural and biological frameworks. The Arbiter's form pulsed with what Jack was learning to interpret as excited agreement. The Executive Council has analyzed 70 years of human diplomatic interactions. In 89.7% of successful negotiations involving humans, this physical communication was a significant factor, yet it has never been officially acknowledged or utilized. Jack sat back, processing this information. So you're saying humans are good diplomats because we, stand correctly? That is a significant oversimplification. Zelpraxi clicked, but not entirely inaccurate. Your species evolved as social predators who needed to coordinate hunting without alerting prey. This required advanced physical communication skills, what humans call body language. Most council species evolved different communication solutions. But if this is a diplomatic advantage, Jack asked, why the increased restrictions? The Arbiter pulsed solemnly. Because these same capabilities that make humans excellent mediators also make you exceptionally dangerous when provoked. The incident with Ambassador Gross demonstrated both aspects within minutes of each other. The hologram showed the footage again, Jack's instinctive punch followed by his successful de-escalation of the situation. Therefore, the Arbiter continued. The Executive Council proposes a modification to human diplomatic protocols. Human representatives will be permitted, indeed encouraged to serve as mediators in high-conflict situations, but with enhanced monitoring and mandatory training in the conscious control of their instinctive capabilities. Jack stared at the display, still trying to absorb the implications. You want to turn human diplomats into, specialized negotiators? In essence, yes, confirmed Zelpraxi. Earth's diplomatic corps offers a resource no other species can provide, representatives who can physically communicate respect, authority, or deference in ways that register correctly across vastly different biological frameworks. Humans are being weaponized, Jack realized. Just not in the way anyone expected. The Arbiter's form rippled with what might have been laughter. An apt observation, which brings us to the final matter. The hologram shifted one last time, displaying what appeared to be personnel files, Jack's personnel file, specifically, alongside those of other human diplomats. The Council wishes to establish a new diplomatic division specialized in high-conflict mediation. We would like you, Human Reynolds, to serve as its first director. Jack blinked in surprise. Me? I've only been here 2 months. There must be more experienced human diplomats. Experience is not the primary qualification for this position, rumbled Mr. Val. Analysis of your biometric data during the Cygnus-Arm negotiations revealed something quite remarkable. The hologram zoomed in on brain scans taken during Jack's mediation sessions. Certain regions were highlighted with pulsing colors. Your neural patterns show exceptional activity in regions associated with both empathetic understanding and threat assessment, explained Zelpraxi. In simple terms, you are biologically predisposed to both understand others' perspectives and recognize potential dangers, a combination particularly valuable for diplomatic work. Jack stared at the scan of his own brain, feeling distinctly surreal. So I got this job offer because of how my neurons fire. That, the Arbiter pulsed, and because you are the first diplomat in Council history to render an ambassador unconscious and then successfully negotiate a treaty with them within the same session. Despite himself, Jack laughed. When you put it that way, it does sound like a unique qualification. Do you accept the position, Human Reynolds? Asked Zelpraxi formally. Jack looked around the room at the senior representatives of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, all waiting for his answer. 2 months ago he'd been a mid-level diplomat who'd drawn the short straw. Now he was being offered a chance to fundamentally reshape interstellar diplomacy. All because he'd punched someone. I accept, Jack said finally. On one condition. The Arbiter pulsed curiously. State your condition. I want full disclosure of this information in the orientation material for all future human diplomats. No more mysterious references to the incident of Diplomatic Corridor 7. If humans are going to serve in this capacity, they deserve to know exactly why. The council members exchanged glances, or whatever passed for glances among species with such varied sensory apparatus. Condition accepted, the arbiter announced after a moment. Though we request one small amendment to your proposal. What's that? We would prefer to maintain the mystery of Corridor 7 in public materials. It has proven quite effective at ensuring humans remain mindful of their capabilities. Jack smiled. I can live with that. As the meeting concluded and Jack rose to leave, Senior Counselor Zell Praxi approached him. There is one detail we did not share with the full Executive Council. Human Reynolds, the ancient insectoid, clicked quietly. The real reason humans are the only species required to be unarmed in council chambers. Jack raised an eyebrow. There's more. Indeed. The archivists have maintained the complete records of early human diplomatic interactions. While your physical capabilities are indeed formidable, they are not unique. Several council species possess similar or greater potential for damage. Then why? Because Zell Praxi interrupted, compound eyes gleaming. Humans are the only species who consistently achieve their diplomatic objectives after physical altercations. While other species resorted to violence out of anger or frustration, humans appeared to calculate, consciously or not, exactly how much force to use to establish dominance without creating lasting enmity. The archivist's mandibles clicked in what might have been admiration. In simple terms, Human Reynolds, your species wasn't banned from carrying weapons because you're dangerous. You were banned because you're dangerous and effective. Jack stared at the ancient insectoid, processing this final revelation. So the statute was designed not just to protect the council from humans, but to protect humans from the consequences of their own effectiveness. Zell Praxi finished. Had the full extent of human capabilities become common knowledge, certain, less enlightened factions might have sought to eliminate the threat permanently, rather than harness it constructively. As Jack walked back to his quarters that evening, he found himself looking at his hands differently. Not as weapons, but as tools for communication as much as confrontation. The revelation explained so much about human history, about how a physically unimpressive species had become apex predators on their home world. Humans weren't inherently more violent than other species, they were just better at it. Jack's comm unit buzzed with a notification. His new diplomatic credentials had been issued, granting him access to the highest levels of the complex. They included a note from the arbiter, Director Reynolds, your first assignment begins tomorrow. The Drexian Hegemony and Pax Federation have requested a human mediator for their border dispute. Ambassador Gross has specifically endorsed your appointment. He asked me to convey that he hopes negotiations will be productive, but not unconscious making. Jack laughed, tucking the comm unit away as he entered his quarters. On his desk sat a carefully deactivated Krelvac blood dagger mounted on a display stand, Gross's gift following the successful negotiations. Beside it was a small box containing the monitoring bracelet he would be required to wear as part of the new protocols. Jack opened it, examining the sleek device designed to alert security if he made movements consistent with human combat techniques. He slipped it on, feeling its weight. A small price to pay for the opportunity ahead. As he looked out the viewport at the stars beyond, Jack Reynolds, Earth's accidental diplomatic weapon, smiled. Humanity had found its niche in galactic politics, not despite their instincts, but because of them. He just hoped his next negotiation wouldn't require quite so many punches.